Good evening, and welcome to Nox Historia. Tonight, we travel to the world of Song Dynasty China. Set the day down now. Whatever it asked of you, whatever it took from you, it is finished, and it can wait. There is nothing left for you to solve tonight, no message that will not keep, no worry that will not still be there in the morning, to be dealt with then, in the light, by a rested mind. Let your shoulders come down from wherever they have been holding. Let the bed take your weight, all of it, the whole honest weight of you. Let your breathing slow on its own, in its own time, the way it already knows how. And come with me, in the mind only, a long way from here. We are going to walk into one evening in a city that no longer exists, a city that was, on the night we are visiting, the largest gathering of human beings anywhere on the face of the earth. We will arrive at dusk outside its walls. We will go in through a gate, and then we will simply walk, slowly, through a single ordinary night and out the other side of it, into morning. You do not have to go anywhere. You do not have to do anything at all. You only have to let the pictures come. That is the whole shape of tonight. One city, one night, walked from end to end unhurried. There is no rush anywhere in it. If we linger somewhere warm, we linger. Nothing is waiting for us, and nothing can be missed. Let us fix the when before we go in, so that the rest of it can drift. Picture the year 1100, or near enough, 9 centuries ago and a little more. This is China under the Northern Song Dynasty, which held the north from the year 960 until 1127. Its capital is a city called Kaifeng, known then as Bianjing, or as Dongjing, the eastern capital, standing on the flat green plain a little south of the Yellow River. It is old, this world, older than most of what we call old, and yet, as you are about to see, it is going to feel unnervingly close to your own. Here is something most people never learn. Almost everywhere in the pre-modern world, and for almost all of recorded history, the night did not belong to ordinary people. It belonged to the state, or it belonged to no one. Cities shut down after dark. In Tang Dynasty Chang'an, the great capital that came before this one, the city was divided into more than 100 walled wards, like the cells of a honeycomb, each with its own gates. At dusk, the drums beat, the ward gates swung closed, the 2 official markets shut, and to be found walking the avenues after curfew was to answer for it. That city did not merely go quiet at night, it was closed ward by ward, and everybody was inside something. And the song let it go, piece by piece, and then all together. As early as the year 965, an imperial order allowed the markets of the capital to stay open past the 3rd watch of the night, and across the century that followed, the whole apparatus of curfew, the ward walls, the drums, the shutting, quietly dissolved. What was left was something the world had not seen before, a city where the streets simply stayed open. The shops kept their doors unbarred. The food stalls burned until the 3rd watch, near midnight, and the earliest of them were lighting again by the 5th watch, in the small hours before dawn, which means that on some streets of this city there was no hour of the night at all when you could not buy a hot bowl of something from a man who was awake. This is the birthplace of nightlife, not as a figure of speech, the actual place, and very nearly the actual moment. And we know it because a man wrote it down from memory. His name was Meng Wanlao.
He lived in Kaifeng as a young man, and later, older, in exile, with the city of his youth gone from him. He sat down and set out everything he could still remember of it. The streets, the shops, the food, the festivals, which stalls sold what and on which corner. He called it Dong Jing Meng Hua Lu, Dreams of Splendor of the Eastern Capital. He finished it in 1147. Almost everything we will see tonight he saw first, and missed, and wrote down so that it would not be lost. So understand what we are really doing. Tonight, we are walking through one man's homesickness.
You do not need to remember any of this. There will be no test in the morning, no fact you must carry out of the dark with you. If the dates come loose and float away, let them go. Meng Wenlao would not have minded, and neither do I. If you happen to fall asleep long before we ever reach the market, that is not a failure of yours. That is exactly what this is for. The history is only here to give your mind something gentle and true to rest its weight upon, the way your body is resting now on the bed. So loosen your hold on it. Let us simply begin. Now lift your eyes to the walls. We are standing out on the plain to the southeast of the city, in the last of a spring evening, and the light has gone the color of weak tea. The country here is flat as a laid table, green and brown and worked over, every field of it farmed already for 1,000 years. There is no hill to climb for a better view, and no need of one. The walls do all the rising that this landscape does. And they go on. Northern Song Kaifeng was ringed by 3 sets of walls, one inside the next, like the rings of a tree. An outer city, an inner city held within it, and at the very heart the imperial city, where the emperor kept his court. It is the outermost ring that stands before you now. Rammed earth, immense, running away from you to the left and to the right until it stops being a wall at all and becomes simply the horizon. Its circuit was recorded at 50 li and a little over, which is something near 27 kilometers, 17 miles, all the way round. To walk its length would take you the better part of a day. And behind it, and this is the part to rest on, behind it lives something close to 1 million people. The counts do not agree, as counts 900 years old never quite do. The careful estimates run from 600,000 or 700,000 up past 1 million, and past 1 million again once you add the soldiers garrisoned here. But take the shape of it rather than the number. From about the year 1013 until 1127, Kaifeng was, so far as we can tell, the largest city on earth. Not the largest in China, the largest anywhere. Baghdad was smaller, Constantinople was smaller, and London, that same evening, was a muddy little river town of a few tens of thousands, which could have been set down inside one of Kaifeng's quieter districts without anybody particularly noticing. Hold that a moment, out here in the cooling air, while the wall goes dark against the sky. 1 million people, all of them getting ready, right now, for the evening. 1 million suppers being thought about, 1 million lamps about to be lit, 100,000 small decisions being made about what to do with the night. And the great difference, the thing that makes this city and this night worth the whole journey, is that here, for once, they may actually go and do it. Come down the road toward the gate and let us join the last of the day's traffic going in. You are not alone on this road, you never would be. Carts loaded with charcoal and cabbage and roof tiles, a string of donkeys with their heads down, a man carrying 2 baskets on a shoulder pole, walking with that small bouncing rhythm that makes a heavy load lighter. Somebody's grandmother riding, being talked to by somebody's son. Nobody is hurrying. There is no longer any reason to hurry.
That is the change, and it would be easy to walk straight past it. In an older city, this hour would have a knife edge in it. The drum would be counting you down. Everyone on this road would be doing the arithmetic that every traveler of the ancient world had to do at dusk. How far to the gate, how much light is left, and what becomes of me if I am on the wrong side of it when it shuts? Get that sum wrong and you slept in a ditch. That particular anxiety is simply absent from this road. It has been absent for generations. Nobody walking here is even thinking about it, in the way that you are not thinking about the air. The gate itself, when it comes up over you, is a tunnel more than a doorway, a deep arched passage driven through a wall thick enough to hold a road inside it, with towers standing above, and the roof lines lifting at their corners the way Chinese roofs do, as though the whole building were being carried rather than built. You pass into the dark of it, and there is that moment every walled city gives you, sudden cool, sudden echo, 10 steps of shadow, voices bouncing off stone, a cart rumbling somewhere ahead of you and sounding much larger than it is.
And here is the detail I love, because a painter left it for us on purpose. There survives a handscroll called Along the River during the Qingming festival, painted by Chang Zeduan in the early 12th century. 5¼ meters of Kaifeng unrolled, more than 800 people in it, with the boats and the shops and the bridges and the dogs, all of it drawn from life by a man who had stood in these streets himself. And when the scroll arrives at the great city gate, the gate is open and there is nobody guarding it. No soldiers, no inspection, just the road going in and the people going in with it, and a camel train ambling out. Scholars have remarked on that quiet detail for a very long time. Whatever these walls were still for by now, they were not really for keeping the city shut. Turn now and let the canal find you, because before we go in among the lamps, you ought to know why any of this is here at all. And the answer is not the wall. The wall is the least of it. Look at where this city has been put. Flat land in all directions, no mountain at its back, no gorge, no natural moat, nothing that a general would call a position. The older capitals had all of those advantages, and Kaifeng has none of them. And there were people at court who said so, plainly, who argued that the capital ought to be moved somewhere a country could actually be defended from. They lost that argument, and they lost it to a ditch full of water. There it is, the Bian Canal, the Bian coming in from the southeast, passing through the city and out the other side, one of 4 waterways the song threaded through Kaifeng and knitted into a web that reached in every direction. This is not a river that happened to be lying here conveniently. It is an artificial thing, a limb of the Grand Canal, dug and redug and dredged out again over centuries, and it runs south to the Huai and on to the Yangtze, which is to say that it runs to the rice. That is the whole secret of this city. The north held the throne and the armies, the south grew the food, and the Bian was the artery between them. Kaifeng stands exactly here, because this is where the grain could reach.
And the grain came. In a good year, the barges brought something like 6 million shi of tribute grain up this water to the capital. In the year 1008, the figure reached about 7 million, and in some years afterwards it went higher still. There is no other way to feed 1 million people in the 11th century, not one. Every bowl of rice eaten in this city tonight came up this canal in a wooden hull. See how it lies now in the last of the light. The barges are moored along the bank for the night, dark and heavy and low, tied off and gone completely still.
Somewhere along them, a man is sitting on a deck with his back against the cargo, doing nothing at all, which, after a day of doing everything, is its own kind of wealth. The surface has gone glassy and flat, the way water does when the wind drops at dusk, and it is holding the whole sky upside down. The last apricot of the west, the first star, the black paper cutout of a bridge. The moon is up already, pale, and lying along the water in one long, unbroken line, perfectly still, as though somebody had set it down there and it had simply stayed. And now the lamps are being lit. Watch it happen, because it happens the way wind moves over a field of grass, not all at once, but running, one at a time, and then in tens, and then everywhere. A boy up on a stool at a shop front, reaching with a taper. A woman hanging a lantern on a hook beside a doorway and giving it a small push so that it swings. Oil lamps set out along stall boards in rows. The great restaurants lighting their upper stories, floor by floor, until they stand over the street like lit ships. And the light of them is not the light you know. There is no white in it anywhere, nothing electric, nothing hard. It is oil light and firelight, orange, low, unsteady, warm as skin, and it does not so much illuminate a street as make a chain of small golden rooms all along it, each one holding a doorway, a face, a bowl, a hand.
Come in off the road and let the city close gently around you. The street here is broad. The Song laid out real avenues with a channel down either side and trees planted along them, and it is full and filling further. This is not the end of the day here. Something is beginning. You can hear it gathering. Talk, mostly, the low, continuous murmur of a very great many people, and underneath it the small noises of business, a shutter going up, a knife on a board, someone calling out the price of something, someone laughing at the far end of the street. Smoke on the air, and coal in the smoke, which we will come back to later. And food, everywhere, food. And here a strange feeling may settle over you, and I would like you to notice it before we walk on. None of this is what 900 years ago is supposed to look like. There is no gloom in it. Nobody is huddling. The shops have signboards, and the signboards have brand names on them. The doors stand open. The streets stay lit, and the whole enormous machine of the place is simply carrying on into the dark as though the dark were nothing very much to worry about. This was not a festival. This was Wednesday. This was ordinary. So, let us walk on into it, slowly, with no destination and the whole night to get there. The lamps are lit, the street is going gold, and somewhere ahead of us the night market is opening. Let us walk on toward the sound, for the street ahead of us is waking rather than settling, and that is the strangest thing about this place. You hear it before you see it, a low, wide, continuous murmur, the sound a great many people make when not one of them is in any hurry. Then the turn in the lane and the light. Lamps in every doorway, lanterns strung on poles and hung beneath the awnings, small oil lamps ranked along the trestles of the stalls, each one modest, all of them together making a ribbon of soft gold that reaches away from you down the street further than you can see. The night market of Kaifeng is opening. It will not close. Stay a moment with how remarkable that is, because you have walked into it so easily that you might miss it altogether. For nearly all of human history, in nearly every city on earth, the dark belonged to nobody. A drum sounded at dusk, the gates of the neighborhood swung shut, and to be found in the street after that hour was to be found doing something wrong. 2 centuries before tonight, Chang'an, the Tang capital that stood as the model for half the world, was laid out as a great chessboard of walled wards, more than 100 of them, with 2 official markets and nothing else, and at dusk every one of those wards was locked from the inside. The city did not sleep, it was put away. The song took the walls down, not in one grand gesture, but slowly, the way real things change. The shops leaked out onto the avenues, the ward gates stopped being shut, and by the year 1063 the old curfew had been formally let go. What was left is this, a city with no closing time. The night markets of Kaifeng, we are told, ran until the 3rd watch near midnight and opened again at the 5th watch in the last dark before dawn, which leaves a gap of perhaps an hour or 2 in which almost nothing at all is sold. And in the busiest lanes, on the busiest nights, even that gap quietly closes. These are not vague places, they have names. The night market at Zhouchao, the bridge just south of the palace, the market along Ma Sing Street, the market at Pan Lao, and they kept their hours in weather that would empty any market you have ever stood in, through wind, through rain, through the snow of a northern winter, business as usual. We know because a man who lived here wrote it down. Meng Yuan Lao spent his boyhood and his young manhood in these streets, and long afterwards, far away, he set out everything he could still remember of them, street by street and stall by stall, in a book called The Dongjing Menghua Lu, The Dreams of Splendor of the Eastern Capital. Nearly everything we are about to look at, he saw first. So walk slowly. There is no curfew and no hurry, and nowhere at all that you need to be. Let us start where the smell is strongest. The stalls stand close along both sides of the way, and the first thing to set gently right is the picture in your head. You may be imagining rice, but Kaifeng is a northern city, and the north of China is wheat country, and so what is being made in front of you, in the steam and the lamplight, is bread and noodles. Dough slapped flat and baked against the hot inner wall of a clay oven. Buns filled and stacked in bamboo steamers, the steam going straight up into the cold and vanishing, and noodles, pulled, boiled, dropped into a bowl and dressed, one of them recorded by Meng himself with great simplicity as noodles laced with lean and fatty meat. Then look at the range of it, which is far wider than you would guess. Along one stretch you might find quail and rabbit dried into jerky, and cured meats hanging in rows, fish and shrimp and crab and turtle brought up on the canal, tripe and kidneys and all the honest inward parts a thrifty city never wastes. And the seasoning was not simple. A Song cook reached for ginger and vinegar and salt, for soy paste and sesame oil, for the numbing prickle of Sichuan pepper, for cardamom crushed fine, for walnuts and ginkgo nuts and the zest of citrus. This is not survival food. This is a cuisine, confident, inventive, curious, being sold to strangers on a street corner at midnight. There are sweet things, too, and cold things. Sesame drinks, fruit in season heaped and shining under the lamps, sugar and honey, and in the summer months a dish whose first written mention anywhere in the world is in Meng's book, fine strand cool jelly, a bean starch jelly cut into threads and served cold, sold up and down these lanes to people trying to get out from under the heat. It is still eaten in China today. 900 years, and the recipe simply carried on, the way the best things do.
And here is what makes all this lovely rather than merely impressive. The food was for everyone. A laboring man in Kaifeng might earn something like 100 copper coins in a day, and a meal at these stalls cost him only a fraction of that, much the same share of a day's work it might cost you. Meng records the habit of the city's working families with a kind of affectionate exasperation. He says they earned 100 coins in the morning and had spent them all by nightfall. They were not saving, they were eating well on an ordinary evening because they could.
Breathe it in. Steam and sesame oil and hot dough and sugar. Let it make you comfortable rather than hungry. Watch the hands at the counter now, at the stall where the fruit is stacked and shining. Coins mostly, round bronze coins with a square hole punched through the middle, threaded onto a string. The money China had used for 1,000 years and would use for 1,000 more. But watch a little longer and you will see once a man reach into his coat and lay down a piece of printed paper instead. The stall-holder glances at it, nods, folds it away. Nothing happens. Nobody remarks on it. And you have just watched something that had never happened anywhere else on earth. Because that is money, not a receipt of money, not a promise to be redeemed somewhere else eventually. Money, spent, accepted, gone into a pocket. It is called jiaozi, and it is the first paper currency in the history of the world. Sit with that a moment, because the picture most of us carry is wrong in an interesting way. We file paper money under modern, a thing of banks and skylines and the last few centuries. Europe would not print its first banknotes until the 1660s. This stall-holder in Kaifeng is taking one, without comment, more than 600 years earlier, on an ordinary night for a bag of fruit. And the reason it happened here and not somewhere else is beautifully mundane. It was not genius, it was weight. Far away to the southwest in Sichuan, copper was scarce, and so the province ran its money on iron instead. And iron is heavy, and iron is cheap, which is a miserable combination in a coin. To buy anything of real substance, you had to shift a punishing mass of metal across a province made of mountains. So the merchants of Chengdu did the obvious thing. They took your iron on deposit and handed you a printed slip saying how much of it was yours. And then people began to notice that the slip itself would do. It changed hands. It bought things. Nobody went back for the iron. The rest is administration, which is usually where the real history lives. 16 of the largest merchant houses of Sichuan agreed to print to a common design so that a note issued by one would be honored by another. A private currency held up by nothing but reputation. And when some of those houses failed, the state stepped in. In the year 1023, the court founded a bureau at Chengdu for exactly this purpose, and in 1024 it issued the first government paper notes, fixed denominations, valid for a set term of years, exchangeable back into coin for a small fee of 30 coins on the string. A treasury, a reserve, an expiry date, all of it 1,000 years ago. And yes, they learned the other half of it too before anybody else had the chance to, that when you print more promises than you can keep, each promise quietly becomes worth a little less. The world has been relearning that ever since. But not tonight. Tonight it is simply a piece of paper worth a bag of fruit and a man walking away into the lamplight with both his hands free. Lift your eyes from the stalls now, above the lamps, and look at the buildings themselves. They are shops, permanent ones, with fronts that open straight onto the street, with signboards and hanging banners and painted awnings, with upper stories where the family lives above the trade.
That sounds like nothing at all. It is, in fact, the whole revolution. In the old capital, the merchants were penned inside 2 official markets, and the houses hid behind their ward walls. Here, the city has turned itself inside out, and commerce simply lines the road, exactly as it does in every city you have ever walked in. Some of these buildings are enormous. Kaifeng holds 72 great licensed taverns, the Zhengdian, which alone have the right to brew as well as to sell, under the state's monopoly on wine. And beneath them a countless swarm of smaller houses, the Jiaodian, who buy their wine from the great ones and pour it for everybody else. The grandest of the 72, Fan Lu, is a tower of galleries and staircases said to hold upward of 1,000 guests. Its upper floors, a little awkwardly, look down into the palace grounds.
And what happens inside will feel oddly familiar. There are menus with fixed prices. You order as an individual, and your dish is cooked for you, rather than ladled out of a common pot. The waiters take the orders of a whole table by memory, hot, cold, lean, fat, all of it, and come back carrying, as Meng describes with obvious delight, 3 bowls in the left hand and some 20 more stacked up the right arm from wrist to shoulder. And if you would rather not come out at all, you send word. The practice is called Su Huan, call and demand, and the food arrives at your door, hot, on request. Paris would not have any of this for another 400 years. Underneath it all sit the guilds, the hung, and they are the quiet skeleton of the whole thing. Every trade has one: the fruit sellers, the fishmongers, the ironmongers, the men who deal in medicine or silk or coal. The guild sets prices between wholesaler and shopkeeper, keeps the standards, settles quarrels within the trade, and speaks for its members when the government wants taxes or wants goods. It is not a romantic institution. It is simply the reason a stranger can walk into this market at midnight, buy from a man he has never met, and be reasonably sure of what he is getting. Trust, organized. That is the machine humming under the lamplight. Nothing about it is loud. It has been working all evening, and it will still be working when you are asleep. Draw a slow breath and notice the smell that sits underneath all the others. Beneath the sesame oil and the steam, beneath the sugar and the hot dough, there is a low mineral warmth in the air, faintly sweet, faintly sharp, a smell you might know from an old railway station or a grandparent's fire. It is not wood smoke. Kaifeng in the year 1100 is a city that runs on coal. It happened because of iron, and it happened out of necessity, which is how the good ideas arrive. The ironworks of North China had been fired with charcoal, and charcoal is made from trees, and the appetite of the industry had steadily eaten through the forests of the north until there was not enough wood left to feed it. So the ironmasters turned to coal, learning to cook it into coke and blow their furnaces with that instead, and the same fuel followed the same plain logic into the kitchens of the capital. By this century, coal is the main household fuel in Kaifeng, and within a few years of tonight, some 20 new coal markets will open in the city simply to keep the fires supplied. Every one of these stall-keepers is cooking your supper on it. And the iron it made is difficult to take in. By the 1070s, China's output of iron ran to something on the order of 125,000 tons in a year, a scale no country in Europe would come near for centuries. Around Suzhou alone, the poet and official Su Shi counted 36 smelters at work.
It went into plowshares and nails and cooking pots and locks and tools and bridge chains, and, in Sichuan, into those heavy coins that began all the trouble with the paper. This is a coal and iron economy doing coal and iron things 700 years before anybody thought to call such a thing a revolution. And to the people around you, it is not a marvel at all. It is simply how supper gets cooked. Let the warmth of it settle over you. In this city, tonight, nobody is cold. Now stand still for a moment here at the edge of the lamplight and let the crowd move past you. This is the last thing to see before we go in out of the cold, and it may be the best of them.
Look at who is here. A porter with his shoulder pole off shift at last, eating. Two officials in dark robes out of the ministries, arguing pleasantly. A merchant's wife with her servant to step behind her. Boatmen up from the barges, still smelling of the canal. Monks, students, children who ought to have been in bed hours ago and know it perfectly well. A fortune teller, a barber working by lamplight, a man selling nothing but hot water for washing your face. In an older city, every one of these people would have been sorted into their separate wards behind their separate walls and shut in for the night. Here the walls are gone, and so a great man's tall house stands on the same street as a noodle stall, and everybody spills out together into the same warm gold. And we are not guessing at this, which is the marvelous part. There is a painting. A court artist named Zhang Zeduan, working in these very years, made a handscroll called Along the River during the Qingming Festival. One long, continuous picture, some 5 meters of it, that carries you along the canal and in through the gate and down the streets of this city. It survives. You can look at it. And what strikes you first is that the painter has not sorted anybody. The official and the beggar and the camel driver and the child are all drawn at the same size, in the same frame, on the same road, every one of them busy, not one of them more real than the rest. That is not how power usually likes to be painted. It is, however, exactly what the street was. Meng Yuan Lao, remembering all of this from a long way off, wrote a line with a small sigh in it. Men of the capital, he says, are extravagant. He meant it as a mild complaint. 900 years later, it reads like a blessing. They were extravagant with their coins, and with their evenings, and with their light. And the reason they could be is that somebody at some point decided the gates need not close, and nobody ever quite got round to closing them again. For the first time anywhere, the night was not a thing to be survived indoors, it was a place to go. And you have been standing in the cold quite long enough. Just there, across the way, a doorway is open, and a lamp is burning inside, and there's steam on the window, and somebody is boiling water. Let us go in. Come away from the press of the crowd now, just here, where the lane narrows and a lantern hangs low above a doorway. Let us step in through this door.
A hanging cloth brushes your shoulder as you pass, and the whole world changes. The market does not stop, it simply moves away from you, gathering into a soft tide of sound beyond the wall. The sellers and the walkers and the long murmur of 100,000 people going about their night, all of it held now at a comfortable distance, the way rain is held by a roof. And here on this side of the cloth there is warmth, real warmth, banked and steady, rising from charcoal in low braziers, folding around you the way warmth does when you have not known you were cold. Breathe it in. The air here is charcoal and hot water, and something else beneath it, something green and faintly grassy, and a little sweet, like a meadow remembered in winter. That is the tea. We will come to it in a moment. For now, simply stand a while in the doorway and let your eyes adjust.
See how the light works in this room. Small lamps sit in wall niches, and their glow does not reach the ceiling. It pools instead across the tabletops, laying warm coins of light on wood that generations of elbows have polished smooth. On the walls hang scrolls, a stretch of calligraphy, a painting of bamboo done in ink so sparing it is mostly the paper's own silence, and somewhere a vase holds a few bare branches, arranged by someone who thought carefully about it and would never say so. The tea-houses of Kaifeng compete in these things, quietly. The cleanness of a table, the rightness of a hung scroll, the small pride of a room kept well. And here is the thing to hold as you cross the floor. This house has no closing hour. None. Out there, beyond the cloth, the curfew that ruled almost every other city on earth has been let go, and so this room simply keeps its lamps lit and its water hot until the sky goes grey. Nobody will come to move you on. Nobody will bar a gate. There is a place near the wall. Go to it and let the bench take your weight, and let your shoulders come down from wherever they have been holding themselves all day. You have nowhere to be. That is the whole gift of this century, and it is being handed to you now in a warm room at the edge of the largest city in the world. Now watch the man at the brazier, because the water is ready and the whisking begins.
And it is whisking, not steeping. Look closely, because this is not how you make tea, and it is not how almost anyone in the world makes tea today, and yet it is the original way. There is no pot here, no leaves unfurling in a hot flood. Instead, a small block of pressed tea, dried and firm, held over the fire a moment to wake it, then ground on a stone mill until it becomes a powder finer than flour, and sieved again until it is a green so pale it seems to give off light rather than take it. A little of that powder goes into the bowl. A very little hot water follows, just enough, and he works the two together into a smooth paste with the tip of a bamboo whisk cut into 100 fine tines. Then more water, poured in a thin, steady thread, and the whisk begins to move. See his wrist. That is the whole art, and it lives in the wrist. Not stirring, not beating, a light, fast, almost impatient motion back and forth that lifts the whole bowl into froth. And froth is the point. A foam rises, white and dense and fine-grained, thickening until it stands up on the surface like new snow. In this century, a bowl of tea is judged on that foam, on how white it is, and on how long it will keep its ground before the liquor beneath begins to show at the rim in a thin, wet line. The later that line appears, the better the tea, and the better the hand that made it. Men compete at this. There are tea contests in Kaifeng in earnest, with reputations at stake. And there are those who can whisk the foam so fine they will draw upon it with water, flowers, birds, a line of verse, pictures that live on the surface of a bowl for a moment and then dissolve, which may be the most song thing anyone has ever done. It is not a peasant's amusement either. The official Kaifeng wrote a whole book about it, his record of tea, and the emperor himself, Huizong, sat down in the year 1107 and wrote a treatise laying out how tea should be judged, its color, its texture, the quality of its froth, the skill of the person holding the whisk. An emperor of the largest state on earth writing about foam. See too the bowl he is using, dark, almost black, streaked with fine rusty lines like the fur of a hare. It is made that way on purpose. Against a black glaze, white foam shows perfectly.
And now the gentle correction, which you may set down again immediately if you like. Perhaps somewhere you have absorbed the idea that this powdered green tea, the bamboo whisk, the standing froth, is Japanese and always was. It is not. What you are watching is Chinese,
and it is song, and it is happening in this room tonight. Roughly a century after this night, a Japanese monk named Isai will come to China, sit in monasteries much like the ones outside this city, watch a bowl of tea made in exactly this way, and carry the method home with him. Japan will keep it. Japan will love it and refine it and build something beautiful and lasting around it, long after China itself has moved on to steeping loose leaves in a pot and let the whisk go quietly out of use. So when you next see green powder and a bamboo whisk, know that you are looking at a Song Chinese evening, preserved by kind hands on an island for 800 years and handed back to us. Nothing was stolen. Something was simply kept. Take the bowl in both hands now. It is warmer than you expected. Drink and listen, because beyond the tea-house wall lies the Wazi, and it is not asleep either. Out there, past 2 lanes and a bridge, is a whole quarter given over to nothing but pleasure. The Wazi, the tiles, so called perhaps because people gathered there like tiles and scattered as easily. Inside each one stand the gulan, performance rings fenced round with railings, a stage, a canopy, benches. There are more than 50 of them in this city, 50, and the largest will take a crowd of thousands packed shoulder to shoulder in the lamplight, come to see nothing more important than a good story well told. In most of the world on this night, entertainment is something a lord commands into his hall. Here it is something a laborer buys with a coin at a gate at any hour he pleases. And we know their names. That is the small miracle. 40 years or so after tonight, a man called Mengyuan Lao, who lived through this, who walked these lanes, will sit down in exile and write out everything he can remember of this city, and he will name the performers one by one as though naming friends. Wild Man Zhao, who would eat and drink hanging upside down. Hua Zhuor, who sang medleys. Big Head Wen and Little Cow at the lute. Deng Chen on the wind instruments. Zhou Yi and Tian Di, who did impressions of country visitors gawping at the capital, which the capital found very funny. Liu Bai Qin, whose birds and beasts performed tricks. Yang Wen Shu on drum and flute, and In Chang, who told the old stories of the 5 dynasties, and who is probably at work somewhere out there right now, holding several hundred people perfectly still. 900 years later, we know that a man named Wild Man Zhao could drink upside down. Sit with that a moment. Nothing about it mattered. No emperor recorded it. No chronicle preserved it. One homesick man simply loved his lost city enough to write down its clowns. And in one of those rings, a white silk screen is lit from behind, and shapes are moving on it. Shadow puppets, figures of cut and colored hide, worked on rods, thrown as clean silhouettes against the light, while a voice tells the tale and a drum keeps its slow time. Emperors cross that screen, travelers arrive, lovers meet. A child on his father's shoulders watches the screen and not the puppeteer, and does not once wonder how it is done. Let the shapes move without you. You are warm, and you are sitting down, and you have a bowl in your hands. On the low table beside you lies a book, and it is worth more attention than it looks. Turn it over. It is not a scroll. It is bound and printed and unremarkable. That is precisely the point. In most of the world tonight, a book is an object of real wealth, copied out letter by a man's hand over months. Here it is a thing you might buy and lose and not much mourn. Kaifeng has bookshops, printed almanacs, medical handbooks, the classics, poetry, and cheerful nonsense of no literary merit whatever,
all of it cut into wooden blocks, inked and pressed onto paper by the thousand. Cheap books, in quantity, for ordinary people.
And around the year 1040, in this same country, a commoner named Bi Sheng went further. He took sticky clay, cut a single character into each small piece, as thin as the edge of a coin, and baked them hard in a fire. He laid an iron plate, spread it with a paste of pine resin and wax and paper ash, set an iron frame upon it, and packed the frame with his little clay characters. Warm the plate, the paste softens, press the type flat and true, ink it and print. Then warm it once more, and the characters fall loose into your hand, ready to be some other page entirely. That is movable type, and it exists tonight, 400 years before Gutenberg. He had tried wood first and rejected it. The grain showed, and the pieces swelled unevenly when soaked in ink. Here is the honest part, which is better than the legend. Bi Sheng's invention did not sweep the world. Chinese writing needs thousands of distinct characters, and for most jobs it stayed cheaper and simpler to carve a whole page as one block. So the clay type remained a clever thing rather than a revolution. And we know of it at all only because one man happened to write it down, the scholar Shen Kuo, in a book of 1088, who set out the method in careful detail, and then added, almost in passing, that when Bi Sheng died, his font of type passed to Shen's own household, where it was kept as a precious possession. A commoner's invention, saved by a friend's curiosity, recorded on a page. Without that page, we would not know his name. Now consider the young man at the corner table, and lower your voice a little, because he has not looked up once. A lamp, a brush, a book, and a stillness around him like a held breath. He is preparing for the examinations. And it is worth understanding what that lamp means. In this empire, the men who govern, who judge, who tax, who decide, are chosen, in principle, by written examination, not by birth, not by blood, by what a man can set down on paper about the classics and history and how a state ought to be run. The Song have taken this idea more seriously than any state before them. Several hundred men a year receive the highest degree, the Jin Shi, many times what earlier centuries allowed.
And see how carefully they guard the fairness of it. Since 1015 in the capital and 1037 in the provinces, a candidate's name is sealed away from the examiner's eye so that papers are marked by number and not by family. More than that, every paper is recopied wholesale by clerks so that no examiner can recognize a friend's handwriting. Consider what that says. 900 years ago, somebody sat down and thought hard about how a good man might be tempted and built the walls before the temptation came. Every anonymized exam script in every school on earth tonight is a descendant of that idea. Do not let us tell it too sweetly, though. The odds against him are severe. Of the men who reach the highest examinations, only a handful in 100 will pass, and the truth beneath the ideal is that a boy needs years of tutors and books and food and quiet before he can even sit down, and most families cannot give that. Scholars still argue over how many degree holders truly came from nowhere. The honest answer is fewer than the ideal promised, and more than any other realm on earth then offered. But the door was real, and it was ajar, and the lamplight of this room is falling on a young man who believes he can get through it. Whether he does or not, we may leave him to his hope. Let him work. Let your eye fall now upon the cup itself, resting empty on the wood beside your hand. Turn it a little toward the lamp. It is a plain thing,
No gold, no ornament, no crowded pattern. A shape so simple it looks almost like an accident, and it is nothing of the kind. This is the Song eye, and it is the quietest confidence in the history of making things. The belief that a good glaze, a good curve, and no decoration at all is the highest thing an object can be. Simplicity is not what they could afford, it is what they chose. And somewhere in this city, in cabinets you and I will never see, sits the finest of it. Ru-ware, the emperor's own porcelain, fired for a few short decades at a kiln in Baofeng, southwest of here, in a glaze that connoisseurs try to describe and mostly fail at. The color of the sky after rain, they say, glimpsed through a parting in the clouds. Blue that is almost not blue. A surface that is soft to the eye and cool to the finger, veined all over with a fine web of crackle, which may not even have been intended, and which the world decided to love anyway. Lift a Ru bowl, and you would find on its foot 3 or 5 small marks like sesame seeds, where fine spurs held it clear of the kiln floor while the fire did its work. Almost none of it survives. The kilns burned for perhaps 2 or 3 decades and then stopped, and the world lost even the sight of them. Until, in the last century, ceramic historians walking near a village called Qingliangxi began finding sherds of that impossible blue in the ground, and dug, and found the emperor's kiln waiting under the fields. Fewer than 100 whole pieces are known today, scattered across the museums of the world. Yours is not one of them. Yours is an ordinary tea-house cup, made by the 1,000, worth almost nothing, and it has the same restraint in it, because that is simply how things are made here now. Set it down. Let the room hold a moment longer, the lamp, the scrolls, the murmur through the wall, the young man's brush, the last warmth going out of the wood. It is late, and the market will keep without us. Come, there are quiet lanes out there, and somewhere at the end of them a house with a courtyard, and people in it settling toward sleep. And so we step out of the tea-house, you and I, and let the door swing gently closed behind us, and the warmth of that room follows us out into the lane for a few paces before the night air takes it away. Feel how the sound changes. Behind us the market is still burning bright, still calling and bargaining and frying, and it will go on doing so until the sky turns gray. But we are walking away from it now, and with every step the noise thins and softens and falls back, until what was a clamor becomes a murmur, and the murmur becomes something you notice only when you stop to listen for it. This is one of the loveliest things a great city does for you, and it costs nothing. Simply walk 3 streets away, and the city hands you back the quiet.
Take these lanes slowly. There is no hurry at all. See how the great avenue narrows and narrows again, and becomes something you might miss if you were not looking for it. A way between houses, wide enough for 2 people and a handcart, running off into the dark between walls of timber and plaster. Underfoot, the beaten earth is cool and soft. Above you, the eaves lean in from both sides, so that the sky becomes a long ribbon of stars drawn out over your head. And every so often, a doorway breathes out a little warmth as you pass it. And here is something worth knowing, because it is the reason these lanes exist at all. Walk this same walk 200 years earlier, in Tang Dynasty Chang'an, and you could not have done it. That older capital was built as a grid of walled wards, more than 100 of them, each a compound with its own gates, and those gates were shut at dusk. The houses hid inside, the great avenues emptied, guards were posted at the corners, and the streets after dark became a kind of nobody's country that nobody crossed.
Kaifeng tore that up. There are no ward walls here. The houses stand along the streets, opening onto them, shops below and families above, and the lanes run between them freely in every direction. A city you can simply walk through at any hour to anywhere. It seems the most ordinary thing in the world. It was not. It was new. So let us walk. A cat crosses ahead of us and does not hurry either. Somewhere behind a lattice, a woman says something short and fond, and someone laughs and a shutter is drawn too. Lamplight comes through the paper of the windows in warm, soft squares and lays itself down on the earth of the lane in front of you, and you walk through one square of light, and then the dark, and then another. Here is the gate we have been walking toward. Let us stop at it a moment. It is not grand. This is a merchant's house, a good one, a family that has done well out of the canal traffic, silk perhaps, or grain, or the money lending that a city this rich makes possible. But it announces nothing from the street. A timber gate under a small tiled roof, a lantern hanging above it, with the family's name brushed on the paper, going gently orange and quiet in the last of its oil. In Kaifeng, you do not show your wealth on your gate. You keep it inside, and you turn inward, and that is exactly what we are about to do.
Step through and mind the raised sill. Now, see how you cannot see in. Directly inside the gate stands a wall, a screen set square across your path, so that the way in is never a straight line. You must turn and go around it, and only then does the house open to you. And when it does, oh, feel what happens. The lane and its narrowness fall away behind you, and you are standing in the open, in a courtyard, under the whole of the sky. This is the heart of the house, and it is not a room, and it is not a garden. It is both, and it is the reason the house is shaped the way it is. 4 ranges of low timber halls stand around this square of open air with their faces turned inward, and every room takes its light from it, and its air, and its weather. The courtyard is the house's window. It is also the house's lung. There is a tree in the corner, and a few glazed pots, and a stone basin, and above you the roofs make a clean, dark frame around a square of stars. And look, if you can, at how it is built, because we know a great deal about this. In the year 1100, a Song official named Li Jie, who worked in the Imperial Directorate of Buildings and Construction, finished a manual of how to build, and the emperor had it printed in 1103. It is called the Yingzhou Fashi, the Treatise on Architectural Methods, and it is the oldest such manual to come down to us anywhere in China. It sets out the timbers, the proportions, the joints, the standard modules from which everything is assembled. And what it describes is the great secret of a building like this one. The walls hold nothing up. The frame does. Posts and beams carry the whole weight of that heavy tiled roof, cushioned by brackets that spread the load like a hand opening, and the walls between them are only skin, screens, panels, lattice, filling in the gaps. Which is why a house here can open its whole front to a courtyard on a warm night and simply lift its walls away. Now think for a moment about who lives here, because a Song household is not quite what you might picture. It is not a couple and their children. It is 3 generations under these roofs, and the eldest of them is very likely the one who matters most. The grandmother of this house holds a real and settled authority that has nothing sentimental about it. The household turns on her, and her sons, grown men of business, defer to her, and the young wife who came in by marriage learns the running of the place at her elbow, and one day will hold it in the same way. Age is power here, and it accrues to women exactly as it does to men. And the women of this house are not the shut-away figures the era's reputation might suggest.
Sung wives ran the household as a going concern: the servants, the stores, the cloth, the money, the accounts, and Sung law gave them ground to stand on. This was a rich age, and as it grew richer, the dowries a bride brought with her grew with it, and that dowry remained, in an important sense, hers. A woman's property rights in Sung times were relatively secure, and in certain circumstances, a daughter with no brothers or a mother with no surviving sons could inherit a share of the family estate. The picture is a mixed one, and we should not prettify it. This was also an age when women's lives narrowed in other ways. But the woman who bolted that gate tonight is nobody's ornament. She is the manager of a substantial business. They have eaten, and here is a small, strange thing about their dinner. For most of Chinese history, ordinary people ate twice a day, a morning meal at 8 or 9, and an evening meal at 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and that was the shape of the day, and it had been for a very long time. But this city broke the curfew, and the night market opened, and the evening simply went on, and there were hours to fill and food to be had at every one of them. So Kaifeng ate a third time. The 3 meals you and I take for granted, morning and midday and evening, arranged themselves in cities like this one, out of the ordinary business of a night that no longer had a lid on it. And in Kaifeng, it was said, a great many people barely cooked at all. Why would you, with 800 kinds of food being sold in the streets outside your gate? Let us go in out of the courtyard now. See the brazier in the middle of the room.
It is a wide, shallow basin on 3 short legs, glowing low and even, and it is the whole of the heating in this house. No chimney, no fireplace, no hearth in the wall, just this. A brazier like this warmed everyone from a farmer to an emperor. But hold your hands over this one and notice what is burning in it, because it is not the charcoal that would have been in it a century ago. It is coal. The forests of North China had been cut and cut for charcoal until there were not enough of them left, and by the end of the 11th century, coal had largely taken charcoal's place. Coal for the ironworks, coal for the kitchens, coal in the braziers of Kaifeng. When the state wanted to look after its officials through a hard winter, it did not give them money, it gave them coal. And now, gently, look at what you're sitting on. You're sitting on a chair. Your feet are on the floor, and your knees are bent, and there is a back behind your shoulders, and it is so entirely unremarkable that it takes an effort to see it at all. But you could not have done this here, in this country, in an ordinary house, a few hundred years before tonight. For thousands of years the Chinese sat on the floor, on mats, on low platforms, kneeling or cross-legged, emperors and farmers alike. And the whole world of things was built down there with them, low tables, low screens, everything at the height of a seated person's hands. How it changed is a slow and rather beautiful story. Raised seats came in from outside, folding stools carried down from the nomad country to the north, and, with Buddhism, the image of a holy figure enthroned upon a platform above the ground. By the Tang, the wealthy were trying chairs, borrowed from the traders of the road, and a great many people disliked it intensely. To sit up with your feet dangling was thought unruly, presumptuous, a lapse of propriety. So for centuries the 2 ways lived side by side, high and low, in the same country and sometimes in the same room, and the old way had all the dignity on its side. And then, in the song, the argument quietly ended. This is the age when China stood up. Chairs, stools, benches, tall beds, tall tables, towel racks, armchairs, drawers. High furniture went from the houses of the rich into the houses of everybody, and sitting with the feet hanging down became simply how a person sits, and it has been ever since. And here is the part most of us have backwards. If you have ever knelt at a low table in Japan and thought of it as the Japanese way of doing things, and of chairs as something the West brought East, it is very nearly the other way round. Sitting on mats was the old shared custom of this whole world, China's own for millennia. Japan kept it. China left it here in these centuries and rose up onto chairs about 900 years ago, for its own reasons, largely from its own northern frontier. And when people rise, everything rises with them. The tables grew legs to meet the new hands. The beds came up off the ground. The rooms and the windows and the very proportions of a house had to be reconsidered around a person whose eyes were now 3 feet higher than before. Look at this furniture in the lamplight. Plain, spare, unfussy, clean-lined, no carving to speak of, the wood left to be wood. The song had taste, and its taste was quiet. The children have been asleep for some time now in the inner rooms across the courtyard. Let us not go in. Let us just stand at the edge of it and know that they are there. 2 of them, small, breathing, buried in wadded quilts on a bed that has legs now, that stands up off the floor with curtains that draw around it to make a small warm room inside the cold room. In winter, a brazier will have been carried in and taken out again before the door was closed. The elder one will be back at his characters in the morning, learning them stroke by patient stroke, because in this dynasty, a family like this one can look at a clever boy and allow itself the thought that the examinations are there and the road is at least open. His mother taught him his first characters herself, as song mothers commonly did. But that is tomorrow's business, and tomorrow is a long way off. Listen to the house letting go. It happens in a certain order, always has, in every house that has ever held people. The last dish is set down. Somewhere a servant crosses the courtyard, and a door slides and stops. A voice asks something, and a voice answers, shorter. The old woman's stick taps twice and is quiet. The gate has been barred for an hour. The tree in the courtyard moves a little and settles. And then there is a long moment when nothing at all happens, and you realize the house has arrived somewhere, that everyone in it is lying down, and that the day is genuinely finished. There is something in this that reaches across 900 years and touches you exactly where you are lying now. These were people with a day behind them and a day ahead. They had accounts that would not balance, and a roof tile that needed seeing to, and a cousin who was being difficult. And then the night came, and there was nothing more to be done about any of it, and one by one they set it down and let it go until the morning. That is all tonight asks of you, too. And now the last lamp, and then the dark. Look at it before it goes. It is a small thing, a shallow ceramic dish on a stem, with a little vegetable oil in the bowl of it, and a twist of cotton wick lying in the oil with its tip burning, a soft yellow flame no bigger than a thumbnail, leaning and straightening. It is the same flame that lit every night of the human story until almost yesterday. But this one has a secret in it, and it is very song. The potters of the Cheong kilns, away in Sichuan, made lamps with 2 walls and a hollow between them, and into that hollow you poured water. The water sat under the oil all evening and kept it cool, and a cool lamp burns cleaner and slower, because it is the heat that steals your oil away in vapor before the wick can ever use it. So the little water jacket paid for itself in oil saved, night after night, and the song thought them very fine and bought them by the cartload. Sit with that a moment. Somebody in an ordinary house 900 years ago was burning a lamp that had been engineered to waste less fuel, and had bought it cheaply from a workshop that made them at scale and thought nothing of it at all.
Now the hand comes over the flame. See how the whole room leaps once, and swings, and goes out, and how the dark is not dark at all, not for a moment, how the shapes come slowly back as your eyes let go of the light, the pale square of the window, the line of the roof against the sky, the faint gray of the courtyard beyond the door, and the smell of it, that soft, warm smell of a lamp just extinguished, hanging in the air of the room, and then gone. The house is asleep. The gate is barred. The brazier is banked down to a low red eye. The children are dreaming across the courtyard, and the whole household has let go of the day and gone under together, the way households do. Kaifeng is still awake out there. It will be awake all night. It is the only city on earth that is, but this one house has closed its eyes.
And you and I are going to step outside now, very quietly, through that courtyard and out under the open sky, because there is something above this city tonight that you really ought to see. And so the last lamp is out behind us, and the house has folded itself quietly into sleep, and we step back across the courtyard and out through the small door into the lane, where the night has been waiting for us all along. Let the cool air touch your face. It is the good, clean cold of the small hours, and it carries the faint sweetness of coal smoke from 10,000 banked fires, and the ghost of frying oil from some stall 3 streets away, and beneath it all the low green smell of the canal. Above the lane, the tiled eaves lean toward one another, dark and close, and between them there runs a long ribbon of sky. The city is quieter now, but listen gently, and you will find that it is never quite silent, and this is the thing you must understand about Kaifeng. Somewhere off to the east there is a murmur, soft and continuous, like a sea heard from far inland. That is the night market, still going, still lit, and it will still be going when the sky turns gray. A cart passes at the end of the lane, its wheels turning slow. A voice says something to another voice, and both of them laugh low and are gone. A dog resettles itself in a doorway. Somewhere a shutter is opened and closed again. Remember what we found at the gates this evening, and let yourself feel the strangeness of it now that the hour is so late. Almost everywhere else in the world of this century, and in nearly every century before it, the dark belonged to the authorities. A drum sounded, the ward gates were barred, and any ordinary person still out in the streets was, by definition, doing something wrong. The song let that go. They let the night out of its cage and gave it to whoever wanted it. And this is what that gift sounds like at the deep end of the night. Not silence and not riot, but a city breathing in its sleep with one eye open, and someone, somewhere, always awake. And now lift your eyes slowly away from the lane and up past the eaves, and let us look at what stands over this sleeping city. There, above the roofs, dark against the stars, rises a tower. It is not a temple, and it is not a watchtower. It is a clock, and it is very likely the most sophisticated machine anywhere on the face of the earth tonight.
It stands 40 feet high, 3 stories of timber and bronze, and it was built here in this city by a man named Su Song, who is an old man now, past 80, still living somewhere behind us in these very streets. He was an ambassador, a pharmacologist, a cartographer, a poet, a president of the Ministry of Personnel, and he built this. A wooden pilot model was finished in 1088. The bronze was cast by 1090. By the middle of the decade, the whole thing was standing and running, and it has been running ever since. Let us go inside it in the way that only the drifting mind can and see how it thinks.
At its heart is a great wheel, 11 feet across, and set around its rim are 36 scoops. Water arrives from a tank held always at the same level, so that it comes at one unchanging rate, never faster, never slower, and it pours into the scoop that waits beneath it. The scoop fills, and here is the beautiful part, the part that makes this a clock and not merely a mill. When that one scoop has taken exactly as much water as it can hold, its own weight trips a lever, and the lever releases the wheel, and the wheel turns by exactly one scoop and is caught again and stops and waits. Fill, trip, turn, catch, wait, over and over, all night, all year. That catching and releasing is called an escapement, and it is the idea at the bottom of every mechanical clock that has ever been made, including whatever is keeping time in the room where you are lying. Here in Kaifeng, it is being done with water and patience 900 years early. And what that patient wheel drives is a small model of heaven. On the top of the tower, out under the open sky, sits an armillary sphere of bronze, many tons of it, turning slowly through the night so that it follows the stars exactly as they wheel overhead. On the floor below sits a celestial globe, 4.5 feet across, turning too, so that a scholar indoors can see where the sky is without going out into the cold. And on the front of the tower are little doors, more than 130 of them, and as the wheel turns, small figures come out of those doors in their miniature clothes, holding up plaques to tell the hour, and go in again. Linking it all is an endless loop of chain that Su Song called the Celestial Ladder, and the drawing he made of it is the oldest picture of a chain drive that exists anywhere in the world.
We know all of this in such loving detail for one reason, and it is worth holding on to as you drift. In 1092, Su Song wrote it down. He made a book of it, with 47 drawings of the workings, gear by gear, and he had it printed. The tower itself did not last, the book did. And because that old man sat down and drew his own machine carefully enough for a stranger to follow, engineers many centuries later were able to read him and understand him and build his tower again. His clock still ticks somewhere in the world, because he wrote the instructions. Now let us come out of the tower and lie back and look at what all that bronze was patiently following. The song sky. Let it fill your eyes. There is coal haze low over the city, but above it the air is clear and cold and black, and the stars are laid across it thick as frost. And these are not decorations here. This state keeps a bureau of astronomy, staffed, funded, and watching every single night, and it has kept one for centuries, and its officials write down what they see, and the writing is filed, and the files are kept. Nobody else on earth is doing this so steadily for so long. It is one of the longest unbroken watches human beings have ever kept on anything. Which brings us to the loveliest thing in this whole night, and I want to give it to you slowly. Look toward Taurus, toward the southern horn of the bull, near the star those watchers call Tianguan. There is nothing much there tonight, but 46 years ago, on the 4th day of July in the year 1054, in the first year of the Qi He era, the astronomers of this dynasty looked up and found a star there that had never been there before. They called such things guest stars, which is a very gentle name for it, and this guest was extraordinary. It was so bright that they could see it in full daylight, and they went on seeing it in daylight for 23 days together. At night it burned on and on. They kept watching and kept writing, and it faded very slowly, and it was 642 days before it finally slipped away, on a spring day
in 1056. Then it was gone, and the sky closed over the place where it had been, and the officials filed their notes.
There are men and women asleep in the houses around us tonight who saw it. A woman of 60 was a girl of 14 when it came. She remembers a light in the daytime sky that everyone stopped to look at. To her, it is only a memory of something strange and beautiful from long ago, already fading, soon to be lost. But it is not lost. Here is what those patient clerks could not possibly have known, and what you now know for them. They were watching a star die. A sun far larger than our own had come to the end of itself and collapsed and torn apart, so far away that its light had been traveling toward this city for thousands of years before anyone here was born. And the wreckage of it is still out there, still flying outward, still glowing. We have seen it, we photograph it, we call it the Crab Nebula, and any evening you like you may find pictures of it, a great ragged bloom of gas in the dark, filaments of it drifting apart, with the crushed heart of the old star spinning at its center. Because a handful of Song officials did their job properly on a July night and wrote down the date, modern astronomers can say exactly how old that wreckage is and watch it expand and check their own theories against it. That cloud is the only thing of its kind whose birthday we know for certain, and we know it because of them. Their tidy handwriting is still doing work 972 years later. Let that settle on you softly. The sky above this sleeping city and the sky above your roof are the same sky, and this is the thread that runs between them. And there is one more needle pointing out of this century into ours, and it is quite literally a needle.
Come with us in your mind to a quiet study somewhere in this empire some years back. A man has a sewing needle of steel and a piece of lodestone, which is simply a lump of iron ore that happens to be magnetic. He strokes the one along the other, and the needle takes the power up into itself. And then he tries carefully and stubbornly to find the best way to let it turn freely. He balances it on a fingernail, and it works, but it slides off. He balances it on the rim of a cup, and it works, and it slides off. He floats it, and it turns, but it will not hold still. And then he takes a single strand of new silk and fixes it to the middle of the needle with a bead of wax, and hangs the needle in the still air of a closed room, and there it is, swinging softly, settling, coming to rest, pointing. That, he wrote, is the best way, and he was right, and it is still the principle of a good compass. But he noticed something else, and this is the part that lifts him out of his century. The needle did not point true. It pointed, as they said in China, to the south, and it was always displaced a little to the east of due south. Not sometimes, always. He wrote that down too, plainly, without fuss, in 1088. Sit with what that means. He had found the difference between the direction the Earth's magnetism gives you and the direction the pole actually lies in, the gap we now call magnetic declination, the thing every navigator and every surveyor must correct for to this day. It is the first clear record of it anywhere in the world, and Europe would not write it down for something like 400 years. And within a single generation of his death, another songwriter set down that shipmasters out on the sea were using the needle to steer by when the night was overcast and the stars were hidden. From a sewing needle and a bead of wax to a ship finding its way in the dark in one lifetime. Everything that came after, every voyage, every chart, every crossing, hangs quietly off that. The man with the needle was called Shen Kuo, and he is worth a few moments of your drifting, because he may be the most quietly astonishing person in this whole city's story, and hardly anyone outside China has heard of him. He was born in 1031. He passed the great examinations in 1063 on merit, and then he simply did everything. He ran the Bureau of Astronomy. He was a finance commissioner. He directed the hydraulic works. He was sent as an envoy. And all the while he was looking at things, properly looking, in a way that almost nobody in the world was doing yet. High in the mountains, hundreds of miles from any coast, he found seashells lying in a band in the rock, and instead of calling it a marvel, he reasoned it out, that this had once been a shore, and that land is made and unmade slowly, by water wearing the hills down, and silt laying them out again. He found petrified bamboo in a dry northern place where bamboo cannot grow, and concluded that the climate there must once have been different, in the 11th century, alone. Then, in his 50s, his public career came apart after a campaign that went badly, and he was set aside. And here is the gift in it. He went to a garden estate he had bought years before and had scarcely seen, and when he finally walked into it, he recognized it, because he had dreamed of the place. He named it Dreambrook, and moved there for good in 1088. And there, ill and out of favor, and largely alone, he wrote the book. The Dream Pool Essays. Hundreds of short entries set down in no particular order on whatever had caught him. The needle and its lean to the east, music, mathematics, the movements of the planets, the way rainbows form, the strange bones in the rocks, and tucked among them one modest entry describing an artisan named Bi Sheng, who, back in the 1040s, had made movable type out of baked clay, one character to a piece, set in an iron frame with pine resin, to be broken up and used again. Bi Sheng was a commoner. No one else recorded him. That single paragraph by a disgraced official in his garden is the only reason the world knows the name of the man who invented movable type. Shen Kuo died in 995, 5 winters before this night, thinking himself a failure. He was not. And now the hour turns over into the deepest part of itself, and there is nothing left to learn and nothing left to do but be here.
Down at the end of the lane, a small light is moving, unhurried. It is the watch. The night here is measured in 5 watches, each of 2 hours, and the men who keep them read the hour from the water clocks in the towers and carry it out to the sleeping streets, walking their round with a lantern and a hollow block of wood, marking the watch as they go, so that anyone lying awake knows how much of the dark is left. Listen to him pass, the soft scuff of his shoes, the creak of the lantern's handle, the little wooden note, and then the lane is empty again, and the light goes small and is gone around the corner. Let us follow the lane down to the water, and stand at the low stone edge and look. The canal is utterly still, not a ripple on it, not a whisper, only a long black mirror lying between the banks, holding the moon whole and unbroken on its surface, and the moored barges resting on it as though they were resting on glass. The great highway that feeds this city, that carried the grain and the salt and the tea in from half an empire this morning, has laid itself down and gone quiet, and the lamps of the far bank hang in it upside down, perfectly steady, warm little threads of gold in all that dark water. Nothing moves. The mist stands over it without drifting. 1,000,000 people are sleeping behind us. The wheel in the tower fills and trips and turns and catches and waits.
The bronze rings above it follow the stars around by a hair. The stars go on with their slow turning, and out among them, unseen and unsuspected, the wreckage of the guest star drifts a little further apart, and the moon lies on the water, and the water holds it, and does not let it go. There is a long way to go before morning. Stay here a while, in the still and the cold and the quiet, and let it be enough. Let us turn back now, gently, the way we came, away from the still black glass of the canal, back up the lane where the watchman's lantern swings and dims, toward the one quarter of this city that has not gone dark at all. For the market is still there, thinner, of course, a long way thinner than the wide, bright river of people we walked through in the early part of the night, but there, still burning, a scattering of lamps down the length of the street, like coals raked out of a fire and left to glow. Most of Kaifeng is asleep behind us now. These few streets have simply never got round to it.
See who is left. The noodle seller, who has stood over the same steam for 9 hours and will stand over it for 3 more, wiping his counter with a cloth that gave up being white a long time ago. 2 porters off some barge or other, hunched over their bowls, saying nothing at all to one another in the companionable way of men too tired for words. A clerk going home from somewhere he will not mention tomorrow. An old man with a brazier of chestnuts and no customers, who does not seem to mind. And a cat, moving under the tables with an air of great administrative importance. And here is the thing worth stopping for in this last hour of the market. We know from the memoir a man who walked these very streets will one day write down that the night markets of Kaifeng ran on until the 3rd watch, near enough to midnight, and then opened again at the 5th watch in the last black hours before the sun. Hear that once more, slowly. Closed at midnight, open again before dawn, which leaves a gap so slender that on any ordinary night there was no gap at all. A lamp still lit, a pot still warm, someone still frying something for someone else, right the way round the clock in the largest city on the face of the earth. There have always been people awake at this hour in every city that ever stood. What was new here, what had not happened anywhere before in any century, was that they were simply allowed to be. No curfew came to move them along, no gate closed to shut them in. They were people out in their own city, in the middle of their own night, and nobody thought it the least bit strange. That is what we came to see. It is not a monument, and no one carved it in stone. It is this thin, bright street, and these few unhurried souls, and the chestnut man who does not mind. Let us stand here at the edge of the lamplight a moment longer, and say plainly what it is we have been walking through all night. Because if someone told you only the date, the year 1000 or near enough, you might furnish the picture quite differently. You might reach for something dim and small and hard, a world waiting to begin. We are taught, without ever quite being taught it, that the centuries before our own were a long grey corridor, and that everything bright and clever waits for us at the far end of it. And then you look up this street.
A man is paying his noodles with a piece of printed paper, because paper money was invented here in Song China centuries before Europe thought of it. The book folded in that clerk's sleeve was printed, and he owns it because printing made books cheap enough for a man like him to own one. Bi Sheng having set his little clay characters loose upon the world around the year 1040. The pot on that stall is over coal,
in a city that ran on coal and made iron at a scale the West would not touch for 600 years. Across the rooftops there stands a tower 10 meters high, full of water and bronze and turning gears, which tells the hour by itself all night, whether anyone is watching or not. Somewhere in this city tonight there is a needle that knows where north is, and a man named Shen Kuo who has noticed and written down that it does not point quite to true north, a subtlety that will trouble navigators for the next 800 years. And the boy, asleep in the room above the noodle shop, could, in principle, sit an examination that would carry him out of this street and into the government of an empire. Restaurants with menus, shops with signboards and fixed prices, guilds, credit, 1 million people fed by barge, and over the whole of it, this, a night that belongs to everybody. I want to be careful here, because it would be easy and slightly false to call this world modern. It was not ours. It was entirely itself, and wanted things we do not want, and understood things we have forgotten. But if you had stood in almost any other city on earth on this same night, anywhere at all, and then stepped through some door into this street, into the lamps and the paper money and the printed books and the smell of coal and frying, you would have felt what you are feeling now. Not that you had gone back, that you had somehow, impossibly, gone forward, 900 years early. Now, let us think, while the lamps burn low, of how we know any of this at all, because you may have been wondering, and the answer is one of the loveliest things about tonight.
We know it, first, because a man painted it. His name was Zhang Zeduan, and early in this very century he made a handscroll called Along the River During the Qiming Festival. Silk, ink and color, about 25 centimeters high and better than 5 meters long. It is not a picture you hang on a wall. It is a picture you unroll across a table, an arm's length at a time, so that the city comes to you slowly, the way a journey does. And into that narrow ribbon he put more than 800 people, boats, carts, sedan chairs, shop fronts and their signboards, camels at a gate, a man arguing about something on a bridge. Scholars still gently argue about what the title even means, whether it is the festival or a place, or simply a wish for peace and clear order. But nobody argues about what is in it. It survives, and it is in the Palace Museum in Beijing, and if you look at it tomorrow, you will find, painted with unbearable patience, the awning of a stall, very like the one we are standing beside. And we know it, second, because a man remembered it. Men Yuanlao lived in these streets, as a boy and as a young man, and in time the capital went south, and he went with it, and he did not come back. And years afterward, an old man in a southern city, he sat down and began to write out everything he could still see when he closed his eyes. The streets and their names, the festivals in their order, the shops, the food, 100 dishes and more, set down as carefully as a man might set down the names of his children. He called it Dongjing Menghua Lu, Dreams of Splendor of the Eastern Capital, borrowing an old story about an emperor who dreamed of a perfect land and woke. His preface is dated 1147. Read it and you understand exactly what he was doing. He was frightened that if he did not write it down, no one would ever know that it had been real. He needn't have worried. It is why we can tell you when the market closed.
And the city itself, the city is still here. Not gone, here. The Yellow River has been at its patient work these long centuries, carrying its endless soft load of yellow earth down out of the west, and century by century the plain rose, and old Kaifeng went quietly under.
Dig in Kaifeng today, and you come down through city after city, 6 of them stacked one upon another like pages in a closed book. And there, some meters beneath the traffic and the tea shops and the school children, lies the street we are standing in. The palace lies deeper still, under a lake, under a pavilion, in the dark. Nothing was carried away, nothing was torn down and forgotten. The river simply drew a blanket of soft earth up over the whole enormous city and tucked it in and let it sleep. It has been sleeping ever since. It is sleeping now beneath us and above us, in that gentle way that things do when they have been loved and written down and are in no danger of being lost. And now, so quietly that no one could name the moment it began, the dark starts to thin. Look east over the rooftops, over the tiled ridges and the little stone beasts that sit along them. The black has gone out of the sky there and left behind it something else, not light yet, only the rumor of light, a gray so faint that you doubt it and look away and look back and find it has spread. The lamps in the street have not been put out, but they have begun to look silly, the way lamps do when the morning catches them. Overhead, the great stars still hold, but the small ones near the horizon have quietly gone. And out of the grayness comes the drum. Somewhere across the city, unhurried and deep and far away, a drum is counting out the last watch of the night, the same 5th watch the market has been waiting for. It is not a summons, nobody must rise. It is only the city saying softly to anyone who happens to be awake, "Here we are then, morning." It has said this every day for 140 years, and the sound rolls out across 1,000,000 sleeping people and does not wake one of them. Down our street, nothing dramatic happens at all. The noodle seller looks up and looks at the sky and goes back to his pot. The old man turns his chestnuts. Somewhere a shutter goes up. A dog who has been asleep in a doorway all night with his nose under his tail opens one eye, considers the whole question of dawn, and closes it again. Let us walk down to the water one last time and watch the city come back. The Bian Canal lies exactly where we left it, a long, still ribbon of dark glass between its banks, holding the last of the moon and the first of the morning at the same time, one silver and one pearl, laid quietly one over the other. And on it the barges. They have been there all night, moored nose to tail, hundreds of them, the great grain fleet that feeds this impossible city. Now a lantern moves on one of them, then on another. A man stands up on a deck and stretches, and you can hear the small sound of it across the water, because there is nothing else yet to hear. This is the true beginning of Kaifeng's day, and it has nothing to do with emperors. It is grain. Everything you have seen tonight, the lamps, the printing, the porcelain, the clock, the whole shining, unlikely million of them, stands on these flat, quiet boats and the still brown water that carries them. That is why the city is here. Not for the hills, for there are none. Not for the walls. For this, a canal, and the barges on it, coming up from the south with the rice, all year, every year, patient as breathing. And so the morning comes on in no hurry whatever. The sky over the water turns from grey to a soft, washed blue, and then the east goes faintly rose, spreading upward as gently as breath on cold glass. The tiles begin to show their colour. The willows on the towpath come back out of the dark, one by one. Somewhere behind us, a gate opens, and a cart begins to move, and a woman's voice says something ordinary to somebody, and then another voice answers,
and the great slow murmur of 1,000,000 people beginning their day starts up again, so quietly you could almost mistake it for the wind. But you need not go with them. Your journey tonight is done. Let the barges cast off without you. Let the noodle seller finally bank his fire and go home to bed, walking the empty lane in the grey with his cloth over his shoulder. Let the city we have walked all night take up its morning and get on with it. The 10,000 shops, the gates, the bridges, the clock striking its little bronze figures out into the dawn. Let it all go on, brightly, without us. It managed it very well for 160 years, and it does not need us to watch.
And let go of the last of it, whatever you are still holding. Let go of the walls and the gates and the lamps in the lane. Let go of the paper money and the printed book, the whisked green tea, the courtyard, the brazier, the children asleep. Let go of the guest star the astronomers wrote down, still burning out there where we can find it. Let go of the still canal and the man on the deck and the old man with his chestnuts. You do not need to remember any of it. It was only ever somewhere kind to rest your mind while the night carried you down. And if you are half asleep already, between the lamplight and the water, then everything has gone exactly as it should. They are all sleeping now, the people of Kaifeng, as you, perhaps, are sleeping now. The market has gone quiet at last. The city is safe under its soft blanket of years, and the river is still, and there is nothing left to carry and nowhere left to be, and all the long history of the world can keep until the morning. Sleep well, and when you are ready to travel again, Nox Historia will be waiting. Good night.